Okay. So welcome everybody. This is the last session of the online learning experience and teaching argument. And we're going to use this hour until about 5 o'clock to talk about how we can use the OLE in the professional development settings in the I3 districts. And this is a very open and innovative conversation. We're welcoming all and any ideas. We understand that some people are just thinking of how to use it, some people have used it, and we want to welcome everyone's ideas, even if they're tentative and untested. And it can be a part of the OLE or a way to use the whole thing or whatever's in your thinking at this point. For those of you in the chat, you'll be writing the same sort of things and responding to what people are saying, and Joy will convey that meeting to the Hangout on Air, to the 5 of us, and so we'll get your ideas as well. So the structure that we're going to do is each of us are going to start and talk for 5 to 7 minutes, followed by any questions that you might want to pose on the chat or comments. And we may, we're planning on being an audience as well as participants to respond to each other's as well. So we're going to start with Jennifer Ringo from University of Mississippi Writing Project, just to hear about your ideas. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, when you first put me on the list first, thanks. The word time just popped into my head because it saves a lot. This can save a lot of time, especially for sites that are far from their districts, and save travel dollars as well. It also allows flexibility to the teachers, I think, with their busy schedules. Some of them might be more prone to, doing this in the evening or what have you. I think that'll help them out. Also, one question that I anticipate is, would the OLE count for contact hours? And I referred back to my PD monitoring thing. It's all marked up.
Excellent.
And it would count. The small type says, as long as the hours are bounded in time, they do count. And since it's set up as synchronous, everybody would be there together. You have a beginning and an end time, and then you have the record of the call too, or the workshop. So it would count.
As long as there's a writing project representative there and facilitating the thing.
Right.
That's a key point.
So that's pretty much all that popped into my head. Nothing real insightful, I guess, but.
So were you? I mean, just to clarify, when you're talking about saving time, if you look over all of the sessions, would you use it as a whole unit, or would you take out some pieces?
I would probably use it as a whole unit, but just adjust a few things based on our particular districts. And it probably would be different for each district too, I would think.
You have 2 districts, right?
Correct.
I don't want my toys.
Well, great. Ellen Shelton's camera just died. that's what she just wrote in the chat.
Gotcha.
But,
can you hear her though?
So,
I don't know. Can you?
Can we hear you, Ellen?
I hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
I stare at
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll probably come back to talk more about some of your ideas. We're going to move on to Robin.
I'm going to take it from approach it a little different way from Jennifer and think not just about how to use the actual OLE, but how to use the principles that you know, the way that you designed it, I thought was brilliant. Every week I was astounded anew at your brilliance, and we've already sort of started to use some of those principles with Smith County. For example, the first week, the modeling curiosity. One of the things that really struck me with that is that, you know, students don't have to come up with a brand new topic. They can join a conversation that's already going on out there in the world. So that's a transferable principle, and we've kind of started that already in our work with Smith County, where we're having the kids do some what we call list essays, and you know, those are all over the internet. It's almost like, you know, like a genre now, a list essay. It's a great way to do kind of ease them into research, so they can look out there and see what other people are doing, what types of lists that other people are doing, and you know, do a little research on a topic and make a list of. I've just gone blank, but you know, there's lots of ideas. How to get in the college of your choice, how to prepare for a job interview, you know, that type thing. And so they can do all this research, and they can see what other people are talking about in those same areas. So it's not as if they have to come up with their own topics all the time. So they can just
One of the things I remember about a blog exchange about curiosity was it doesn't have to be something that that the teacher is curious about. It has to be something that the students are curious about, and so something that might seem you know, old and stale to us may not actually be old and stale to students. So I remember that conversation as being really true. So the modeling of curiosity and reminding ourselves that yeah, there's an existing conversation, but people's curiosity comes from, you know, their experience and their culture and their family and everything, and we're not ones to say what you should be curious about or not.
No, absolutely not. And your curiosity changes based on your context, based on what you need at the time, or you know, it might change from month to month. So that's one of the sort of transferable type principles. Another thing that really struck me that I want to try with Smith County is this whole idea of the proposals that you had your students do. I'm really going to steal that and use it with them. And I think maybe one of the main things that jumped out at me all along the way was the blogging as we went, the blog, and how you'd have people curate, you know, from week to week. To me, that's something that's transferable, not just to the teaching of argument, not just to this context with the online learning experience, but those are principles that can go into any classroom. It's sort of the community that you built around what we were doing. And so every week we were going through this process that was really, really a natural, it just seemed so natural, and yet I know there was a deep structure there in the background. You had put a lot of thought into the planning, and yet it just seemed so natural as we walked through the process.
I also thought the blogging and the curating was really great, and I especially liked it when people curated each other's blogs. But if you think of that in a classroom, one of the things I know we all want is for writing just to play an everyday role in the classroom, and that seems like a really a sort of natural way to do it, is to have sort of consistent blogging and consisting. The difference between a blog and a journal is the degree of publicness, you know. So
right, absolutely. The interactivity.
Anyway, Sherry commented, Robin, Sherry Swain is on, and she was on the chat, and she said she was thinking many of the same things as you were, and she said that TCs did list essays and had all of the students do them too. So remind me of the lit review too.
Yeah, that's what we did. All of our, you know, you're familiar with our plan, Tom, and we have thinking partners for all of our Smith County teachers. So all of the thinking partners, we all did our own list essays, and they could use that as a mentor text with their students, and now they've all done their own too. And so the more we're looking into these list essays, the more we're seeing that, you know, they're everywhere. And the kids are really warming up to them and doing pretty well with them.
Great.
The making moves with quotations, I had never really seen it put quite that way, the things you can do with quotations. So it's more than just let's look at these sources and let's just stick them at the, you know, pull some things from each. It's not just that they're there, it's why they're there and what it does for not only for your argument but for the reader. So I haven't used that yet, but it's certainly on the list of things to do.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it wasn't Sherry. It wasn't Sherry Swain. It was Sherry Kinkoff.
Yeah. She's worked. Yeah, she's doing a lot of the work with us.
You're familiar with her.
I've met her a couple of times. Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca. How's your equipment working there?
I think it's better.
It's working great.
Oh, good. My 4-year-old is sitting next to me, so if you hear some noises, that is he, and I apologize for that. But
you don't need to apologize.
He's my youngin', and he's got to sit next to me right now. He's feeling a little neglected.
I understand. So,
okay.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your thoughts about using the OLE in professional development.
Well, I really liked the who was just talking? Was that Sherry just talking?
That was Robin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I liked what Robin was saying actually about the quotations. Thank you. I really liked what she was saying about the quotations because I think that that's really important, and using the different types of quotations in a piece. But I also liked the what we did with revision and thinking more into revision. I know that that's a problem that my own students are facing, and they don't like to go back in and rethink what they've already written. So I'd like to do something with that as well, but I'm not sure that I know what I would design exactly, other than kind of what we did with the quotations, the making moves with quotations in an OLE, with what we're doing in our district right now.
Do you think that so say if we did something like what we did, where you have some samples, what you explain the kinds of quotations, and then you have some sample papers for them to work. Would you think that the teachers in your district would be able to sort of get that and to put it into practice in their classrooms?
Yes, I think so. Yes, especially because of what they've been doing already. We've been working a lot with claim and evidence and warrant, and they were able to take that into their classrooms, and the kids were able to have a better understanding of what those things were. So I think the next step would actually be using quotations for the evidence and supporting it.
Yeah. Great. Anybody in the chat or any of us want to respond, or? Okay. We'll let you go for now.
Okay.
Pop in if you need, and don't worry.
Okay.
Let's see, Laura, you're next. And you're on mute.
Yeah, a 4-year-old.
Okay. My thoughts are going to be pretty similar to what's been spoken. I thought the way that our OLE was set up was really helpful too, because I just thought it was very accessible. And I think with our students and with the teachers and students that were working in the districts, I think the accessibility is just a really big deal. And taking things that maybe they're already doing it and giving a different handle and framework. I have been trying out the RSA Animates with my students, and that's going to need some tweaks because it's taking a little bit more time than probably it should, technology-wise. But when it comes to what my students have learned because of their research and the way they have had to illustrate and everything, that has been pretty awesome. So I think using that idea and maybe taking the technology end out if it's too time-consuming. And then I also really liked the making moves with the quotations, just because as a teacher, that was, that's what's in our head, but I hadn't come up with that way to be able to be like, no, this is how you do it, so that you're putting that expert in there, but you're doing it the right way. So I know in our district, the teachers are really moving more to, they're wanting to do a lot more co-planning. They're not wanting as much demos. They're kind of wanting to look at the nitty-gritty, like what does this look like in my classroom. So
That's
I
a
can
good
see a lot.
sign.
Yeah. So I can see a lot of these components really coming in and enriching that and just giving more tools, especially with argument, and making it maybe a little bit, I don't know, I feel like argument is sometimes really scary, and so just giving that bigger framework so that they're not so intimidated by it.
That's a funny reputation it has of being sort of scary. Like you don't want to start with argument because it's hard or something like that. But I don't think it needs to be that way, really. I think it's all about how it's presented, and if people are reminded that everyone, 2-year-olds are really good at arguing.
Yeah.
Our students are too.
Yeah. Well, and I think reminded people just of all the like the things that are every day that we don't think of as, oh, this is argument, big argument, but that this is what it is.
So when you felt like the OLE was accessible, for you, what made it accessible, do you think?
I think, well, directions are always extremely helpful, and you had definitely mapped things out, and so there was wiggle room still within like how we were approaching things, but it was like, this is what we're doing and this is what we're gonna, and so you could get in there and there wasn't this overwhelming of like, oh my goodness, we have to do all this. And I think someone said earlier there was so much time to converse and to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and so you didn't feel like you had to come up with something right on the spot. There was that time to collaborate. I think the collaboration was really important.
Great. And then those sort of things would be what we would also want to do in PD, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
Great. That's interesting. I'm glad you found it accessible. I was kind of worried that it was too collegey. Because it came from a lot of my teaching.
There were moments that it was a lot. There was a lot of collegey, but I think there was a lot of middle school students to where I could still picture what I would do. I mean, it was coming from that framework, but that's what we do in grad class. I mean, that's what I do in grad classes. Like, I take what they're giving me and I'm like, oh, this is how I can spin it or change it. There's certain things like the proposal that if I were to do something like that, it would have to be really brought down with 7th grade because that would kill me. But the framework and the thought pattern behind it, I want them to start thinking about it. And I know in one of our sessions, we had someone doing the hangout and she was talking about how some of these things are improving, and I just know for myself it was like, okay, good, some of the stuff that we're trying in middle school maybe is coming through at the college level. I don't know.
Right. Could be. All right, thank you, Laura. We're on to Ellen.
Sorry, the video died. So.
Well, you're just sitting very quietly.
So, I feel like I'm going to repeat a huge amount of what's been said, but I think the things that I really loved were when you had the OLE, even though they were college samples, you did ground them in what your practice, what you were doing with your students. And even though I'm trying to anticipate how to take that into a 10th grade world or a 9th grade world, I can see where I could use it. The elements of how did you curate? Well, we've done that with our kids. I may not have called it curating. But I certainly have done that, but not from that standpoint. And how can we use that to help define terms? I loved the visual representations of claim and warrant. To me, those were really powerful grounding tools as to where were we and how do we do this, and then how do you make an argument in a visual about making an argument. I can see the kids really getting into that, especially if you use something like Logster. And I'm going to be really honest, Jennifer's doing a huge amount of this work, and she's doing an amazing job with it. I'm actually considering how do you take parts of this OLE and integrate it into our Wednesday workshops or the works we're doing in other districts. So there's a part of me that's going, OLE beyond, let's take it out of I3, the same concepts, and how do I use this to really hype up our we had a series, a Wednesday workshop series on argument this year, and so how do we bring that into that work? So I'm looking at how do I make the technology part of it really cool with our own professional development that we're selling outside of this work. So I'm not going to lie, that part of my brain, I'm kind of like, oh, Jennifer's doing I3. Let me think about this in I3 and beyond.
So just so everybody knows, Ellen's the director, and she's speaking from that point of view and thinking of the whole project, not just I3. Just a little context. Director thinking.
But I did actually integrate the chat role into my online class this year, just to see how that would work with a descriptive grammar class, which you just can't make that sexy. And it actually was really fun. They got into it, and I think it was probably the most lively class we've had so far. So, just to say some of the strategies that you taught us, take it out of even this context, but it works beautifully in other situations too. So.
Love the chat roll.
Chat roll is like I haven't used it before this either. I have used other chats, but the chat roll seems to work better than other platforms or softwares or whatever they are. But it seems to work pretty good. And one of the things I noticed that is something to keep in mind is we got better at the OLE as time went on, and it wasn't just mastering like how to do the technology. It was becoming better at speaking on chat roll, using the blogs, responding to each other. It's sort of something to remember that when you're doing online work synchronously or maybe even in person, that it takes a while for people to understand beyond the technological learning how to use it rhetorically. So I thought we got lots better at everything as time went on.
We got comfortable with each other, the community and the OLE.
That's true. Yeah, good point. Yeah, it was more than just knowing how to do it. It was getting comfortable with each other. Good point. Okay, Ellen, did you finish your point?
I am.
Okay. Do we have responses from the chat roll or from each other about what we've said so far, or other thoughts or questions? So I have one. I was, let's see, I think I was talking to Rebecca about like putting, getting the moves with quotations like into PD and the accessibility of it. And I guess I'm wondering if anybody has tried it yet with PD. I know some people have tried it with their classrooms, and it worked really well. But I'm curious if anybody has brought the Harris material to teachers in the district yet, and if they did, how it went. On the chat or here?
Well, I'm getting ready to do something for my department tomorrow, and we'll see what happens with that. But it won't be until tomorrow that I could give you any feedback on that. Unfortunately, it was just bad timing.
That's all right. So you have a plan now?
Sort of. I don't know how it's gonna go though. So we'll see what happens.
So what's the plan so far? You don't have to be detailed.
Well, just in general, I'm going to introduce the claim and evidence and warrant because my department really hasn't started. At my school, we really haven't had a formal meeting on how to get the kids to integrate that in their writing. We did something like that as a district, but it was more of the teachers becoming aware of these of claim and evidence and warrant, and then some suggestions on how to take that to the students. But at our school, we haven't had as much of a focus on it yet. So what I'm hoping to do is in the department meeting, take them, excuse me, hold on one second.
It sounds fun to me. I don't know.
He's a lot of fun, but he's distracting me at this point.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want him to hurt himself.
Yeah, right. I don't know. That would be bad on the hangout. Have a hurt kid.
So anyway, I want to take them through the claim, evidence, and warrant, and then also walk them through the different quotations and making moves with the quotations to show them how to take their evidence a step further, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and how they enter into that larger conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So we got a chat from Casey, and he's talking about his students entering into sort of the area of policy. So like there are sort of different kinds of arguments. We didn't really go into this in the OLE, but arguments of policy and arguments of value and arguments of fact. So the students are like getting ready to write letters to their school board and their principal and stuff. So it's a nice use of authentic audience and a way to sort of integrate the pieces of the OLE into a project that the students are engaged in.
And I'm curious, I have a question for Casey if he's willing to share.
Yeah, sure.
What are the arguments? What's the topic? I'm just curious.
We have to wait a minute for him to answer because there's a lag. But I'll ask it on the chat too.
Okay, cool.
Or maybe not. Yeah, that might work. There was an interesting one in Seed from a third grader that I thought was kind of cool, where chocolate milk was taken away because it didn't seem to have as much nutritional value as regular milk. So the kid did a whole bunch of research and said, it's still milk. It actually doesn't have that. There's no difference. It just has some chocolate in it. Anyway, so they got the kid got the chocolate milk back on the thing. So they're arguing about bans on backpacks, electronics, and non-water beverages in the classroom. That's interesting. The whole issue of cell phones in the classroom is kind of an interesting policy for students to engage in, because some parents want the cell phone in the classroom for safety, and sometimes they're a big distraction for students. That's interesting. So Jennifer, you started with thinking about sort of the OLE as a package that you might take to the districts, right?
I mean, it's good stuff, so why change it?
Would you then just, would it sort of be inserted into the schedule that you have already?
That's a good question.
How would you do that logistically too? I'm sort of curious.
I'm not real sure. Ellen and I we're gonna meet about that next week.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, we're gonna meet and you know, kind of map out the second semester, and of course that'll be one of our talking points. See how we might be able to use that.
Great. Great. Because I think that's interesting to see how it would go and what would, you know, what you would need to change or spin in a different direction, or you know, whatever you might need to do to put it into practice in the districts.
I think the thing, Tom, this is Ellen. I think we could easily take the strategy in a linear, you know, from where you introduced and how you brought us through. But I think our biggest challenge is going to be how to take the technology out of it. And how do we, because I think teachers are going to throw it up and say, oh, well, we can't do that because of the technology issue, when the reality is, no, these principles and concepts you're doing all the time. Right. So that actually, for me, is what I'm thinking about for our districts.
And chat roll, for instance, is banned in some places. You can't use it in school.
Oh,
but
wow.
you could do a cool chat roll on poster paper.
You could. You can chat roll, and you can do RSA animates on poster papers, because I've done them. They just animates. Hi, Casey.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you could just pop in like that.
You bet. I thought I'd drop by.
That's very nice. This is like a talk show where somebody just walks in, where a movie star just walks in. That's great.
Random person on the street.
So you've been listening to us. Do you have any thoughts or questions or comments on what you've heard so far?
Well, Joy asked me to jump on and answer questions about the policy arguments. The students just started out. You know, they've had a lot of preparation going through evidence, warrants, claims, and probability qualification. And you know, they've been spending time with annotations. They've written literature reviews, and it's really helped them recognize the evidence and claims in other people's writing. And so I asked for the administrators and the school board member to participate, and they agreed. And my principal provided me with a written explanation as to why the administration believed that the policies were valid, and we just used those as written arguments now that we can respond to.
So kind of like the Hillocks chapter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the idea there that Hillocks has a great example of that, and I've based a lot of the conversations that I've had with my students off of that. But it's it's grown into something that the students are just running with, and the students that I so far this year have had difficulty engaging, and I've had difficulty getting them to even turn in assignments or sometimes show up to class. Those seem to be the students who are really running with this, and had 4 boys out in the hallway last week who were measuring the time it takes them to get from one class to the other and recording it on a chart. And they were comparing if they went from class to class versus class to locker to class versus class to locker to bathroom to class. And we brought in a math teacher today on her prep hour to come in and teach us how to calculate percent change, or percent increase.
Cool.
So fun stuff.
So let me ask you to be a little speculative and say, okay, if you were to start meeting with a group of rural secondary teachers tomorrow, how would you help them implement the same thing in their classrooms as you've done? Where would you start? And
so I brought this up just because of what we were talking about as far as the OLE. I think the OLE just builds this great foundation for these other next steps. And once the students have these understandings and these skills, we have to look at ways to really engage them in them and put them into real world context and real world applications. And I think the big thing is that you have to have that communication with administrators. You have to be comfortable talking about these things, and I found that I just reassured my administrators by saying that this was Common Core, and that this is how it relates to Common Core. Yeah. And that I believe that the students, through a real world context, could apply some of these skills. And I think if I put all of the classroom work aside, I think it's a chance to really show administrators what students can do and why this work that we're engaged in is important.
Cool. Well, way back in September, we had a short discussion about sort of why argument in the first one, and one of the things that we were talking about is how argument is like sort of the clearest example of writing as an action, as something that people do, and to make their lives better, or to get what they want, and so I think that your example right there is such a great thing, and the ability for argument to engage students who are maybe not normally thinking that it's worth it, and they're sort of choosing to be non-participants. Mm-hmm. When they have the chance to actually do something with their writing, it's a different ballgame. Mm-hmm. So that's really exciting, Casey. Also, great to be able to show your administrators what students can do.
Absolutely.
Good. Responses from the rest of you.
Well, Tom, I keep thinking what Casey is saying about that authentic audience and getting the kids to respond. When we did the Google letters to the next president, my kids really responded in ways I'd never seen them before. They actually really wanted to edit. They really wanted to go back and revise. They realized it was going beyond just me or even the administration. It was going to a global audience. So I think that authentic assessment that's really where we make the change in the student perception of why we're doing this.
Right.
That real world application. Because my kids never edited, even now they don't edit as well, and I have college kids, as my juniors did that year. Because they knew that somebody was going to see it and go, ooh, that person from Tupelo, Mississippi said.
Yeah.
I think, too, last year my 7th graders participated in letters to a poet. I forget exactly what it's called. So it wasn't argument per se, but again, it was an authentic audience where they sent their letters, and they got responses back, and different things like that, and where they were these poets that they had studied, and they chose who they got to write to, and they were much more willing, like was said before, to go back and look at it and all that, because they knew that they were, sending these out into the world and wanted to represent well and to share their appreciation.
I think it makes the rest of the writing project more important to them. So when we talk about the difficulty of revision, if the students don't see the importance of it for an audience, that they'll just do, so would I, just do the minimum.
They're just like, well, what's it going to take to pass? Or, if I fix this, will I going to be... One of my 7th grade teachers at Holly Springs is doing something similar with a restaurant proposal.
All right.
They're putting it together. They're coming up with the restaurant, the name. They have to design the whole thing, the menu, and she's going to have some people from the community in some way judge these restaurant proposals, and somebody is going to win. So there's a competition aspect to it. Also, I think she's having them actually make one of the food items that's going to be on the menu and bring it in too. So she's managed to pull in a lot of different things, and they're very excited about it.
Do the kids have to argue for why they chose to make the kind of restaurant they did? Because that seems a natural place for argument to fit in.
Yes, it is. And it's kind of, the setup's like, I think they're arguing that the town of Holly Springs should pick my restaurant to go in this space because, and then, they're going to come up with it. So they're also looking at, they're kind of doing some market research when one of the restaurants are in town. Do we need another pizza place? That kind of thing. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. We have some chat from Sherry Kinkoff about a couple of things, about using an argument of fact around Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious death. That seems like it would be pretty engaging. And she said some of the same things, that they were just really into it for that. And then the other thing is movie nights. 2 movie nights last fall where they have film lessons based on the CCSS. Also, it seems like another opportunity for arguments, especially arguments of value. Which movie is better and why, or for what reason. So those are great ideas. Nice. I like that restaurant thing too. That seems like a big one. That can encompass a lot of different things.
Hey, Tom, I want to say something about arguments of policy with students. I think it's great. And I don't want anybody to get me wrong with what I'm saying, but I think that we can really engage them when we have them do arguments of policy, but I also think we have to be really, really careful, because if we're trying to teach them that they have a voice and they're able to engage in these arguments of policy, then what happens if they convince the reader that the policy needs to be changed? Like, for example, backpacks or cell phones or whatever, and then the policy doesn't change.
Right.
I think we have to really think about that, because then they might begin to think, well, I clearly delineated the argument for or against this thing, and then nobody listened. The policy didn't change.
Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out, because then they would start to think it doesn't really matter what I think. It doesn't matter what's logical. I can't change anything, so let me just stop trying.
That is a really, really important point. And one of the things that Casey did that I thought was really brilliant, and I thought of this and I forgot it, was sort of lay the groundwork with his administrators in advance so that they knew this was coming, they knew they would have to reconsider, and even if they don't change it if they can demonstrate that the students have been taken seriously is a big thing. But I was reminded of when I wasn't such a good teacher, just last year. No, a couple years ago, where I had this whole inquiry, and then I had them write, quote, an action piece, like a piece at the end of the semester where they were supposed to do something. And people wrote, like, to their congressman and to the president, and it was pretty pro forma. I mean, they really weren't believing that their letter would actually do anything at all. And so I think that you're really right that it's important, especially for students who may not think they really do have a voice or a say in things, to create the conditions where they can see at least they've been taken seriously. So that's excellent points. So how we doing? We got about 10 minutes left. And we want to help everybody do a great job using the OLE in the professional development. Any further thoughts from the chat or from the group?
I want to say something about it. I noticed that initially, this was a 6-week experience, and it seems to me, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that our numbers started out higher than they ended. And I'm wondering if there's some way that we could poll the participants and ask why their participation dropped off, because. And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm wondering if it has to do with technology challenges, because that might inform our decisions about using it in our districts, and maybe there's something we could do to be proactive about that, because we work with a lot of teachers in our district who don't even check email. I mean, they're not really on top of things with technology. So I'm just wondering if there is a way that we could find out what those roadblocks are.
So funny you should ask. But we have a Google form that's going out to everybody that we've created that asks questions about technology as well as the content for everybody. And it's an evaluation of it. And we'll try, we're hoping for really a high response from this because we need to know. We really do need to know both positive and what was a challenge for people. And one of the questions is, was technology challenging? So, or a version of that. I can't remember exactly what it is. But we'll make sure, Robin, that is in there. And then you all and everybody else who has participated will get a link to a Google form, and that'll be coming out very soon. So, funny to ask. I was going to remember to say that before we get off. We don't really have to go for every single minute of this, so if we're done, we're done. But if people have additional thoughts, I don't want to close them off. Jennifer, did you want to remind everybody about something?
I can. The Boise Writing Project has an informational text OLE that's starting, I can't remember when, in January.
And we can resend out the link for that as well.
Yeah, but I think that's cool. I mean, I think, ours just ended, and now it's Christmas, and we have all that stuff going on, and then we can start with the new one in January. And when that one ends, I think that somebody else should do one.
I do too. Maybe you. You should do one.
Or a narrative.
Yeah.
Good. We should get somebody to do one on narrative. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Other last thoughts or suggestions or ideas or crazy ideas that you were afraid to even utter? Okay.
Yeah, Tom, I want to thank you for all the work that you put into all of this.
Well, you're welcome. It was a group effort, believe me. There were lots of people helping me with everything. So it was fun for me, too. It was really interesting. And I've never done it before, so I didn't know how it was going to go. But what I appreciated was the spirited participation of everybody, the activeness of it. Because I've always thought of online stuff as being pretty...
Static.
Yeah, static, coming at you, with information. So, but if lots of people helping me and telling me and reminding me that everybody in the audience was an experienced, great teacher. So it was sort of wrong to pretend otherwise and not to draw upon the expertise of the participants.
That's good.
So, okay. Are we set?
Sure.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for figuring out the technology and getting on the session and being so smart about how we're going to move this out into professional development. So this is Tom Fox and crew signing off.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.